The Entrepreneurship Forum is here to connect like-minded people from the Jewish community in London that are interested in either starting their own business or invest or just hearing about interesting businesses. And today we're very honored to welcome Team Levene, who is the founder of Augmented Capital.
So what I'd like to do is maybe just pick through the last 15 years and share some insights of some of the challenges that I've had. I think people always learn more from their mistakes than their successes. So I've had a few mistakes along the way, some big ones. So I think it's always helpful to share some of those and the learnings from that. And also in terms of what I do every day, which is trying to find interesting businesses to back. What are the characteristics? It's there's not a set formula, but without a shadow of doubt, there are key characteristics in the people that we back, and it very much is about people, not necessarily about the idea. If the characteristics aren't right, it doesn't matter how good your idea is, then you won't get investment. So, I had quite a traditional, start in the world. I studied Russian at Manchester University. Lived in Moscow, lived in Sydney, worked with Bain & Company, the big management consultant. And I suspect most people, if not everyone here, is Jewish, and your parents wanted you to be either a lawyer, accountant, a banker, a management consultant. I think that dynamic's changed, but certainly the first few years I travelled around the world. I learned a hell of a lot in terms of, corporate life and some basic training, but I was pretty frustrated. And I decided that I wanted to do something for myself. I was young, I was in my 20s, I had no mortgage, no wife, no children, all the things that I think tie many of us down today. And so, failure really wasn't really an option. I think when you're that young, you just kind of look forward and not backwards, and you think of all the reasons why you'll succeed. So I think you have a healthy disregard for pessimism at that age. So off I went and decided that juice bars were going to be the next big thing. I'd seen them in California, I'd seen them in Australia. I realised that we didn't quite have the climate, as is proven at the moment, to have Jamba Juices, which is the big chain in California, so I wanted to anglicise the concept. So we bought wraps. Back in '98, wraps didn't exist. I think you'll probably see them now in every sandwich bar. And we started to specialise in soup. So we anglicised the concept, so I think we got that bit right. One of the things that the first lesson I learned was timing. Timing is everything. And we found a great site in the base of the tower at Canary Wharf. The Jubilee Line extension was going in there, due to open in beginning of '99. And I'd sunk pretty much every penny I had in this business. And literally 3 months before I was about to open, I got a call from the head of retail at Canary Wharf and said, by the way, Jubilee Line's going to be delayed for a year and we're not going to open the walkway. And I said, well, what am I going to do? You have to open. And they said, well, you can open, but there's not going to be any shops either side of you, opposite you, and there'll be no footfall. So I said, okay, well, what am I going to do? He said, look, we'd love you to open because we've got a great product and we're very excited about it, so we won't charge you any rent. And off I went. And literally, just as this was happening, Starbucks announced that they were coming into the UK market, and they bought a company, if you can go back to the late 90s, called Seattle Coffee Company, and they bought their 50 stores. And all of a sudden, every retail space that I was looking at was being earmarked for new coffee chains. So there was Aroma, there was Coffee Republic, there was Costa, there was Cafe Nero. Some of them don't exist, but wherever you look, there was a coffee bar, and that made it unbelievably difficult for us to find real estate, because people, I was going to landlords saying, here we are, we've got this great new concept, and they're saying Starbucks are going to pay me £100,000 just to get this site. So it made rollout unbelievably difficult for us. So not only did we have a site with no footfall, actually, I couldn't get real estate, which made the model of trying to open 40 to 50 stores in 3 or 4 years rather difficult. So, that was poor timing, and obviously luck plays a great deal in your success as an entrepreneur. And I guess there was an element of bad luck there, but at the same time, I think you make your luck to a certain extent. So where's that business today? So I made a decision pretty quickly that it wasn't going to grow to what I wanted it to be, and I guess that's something that entrepreneurs around the room will empathise with. You sometimes got to make hard decisions, and despite the fact that I'd sunk a lot of money, of my own money at the time, into this business, I felt that it wasn't going to be what I wanted it to be, and so I looked for a buyer. I ultimately kept a stake in the business, found another company that were looking to roll out, and we put these two businesses together, which at the same time, I was starting to show a little bit of interest in the web. And this was in '99. I'd worked with a couple of guys at Bain who were Californians, and they'd come to London and were telling me, what was going on in the Valley. People were showing up with 10-page business plans and coming out with $10 million in funding. I mean, it was crazy. So they came to London and told me this idea that they wanted to revolutionise the world of gambling. And they had this great idea, peer-to-peer gambling, it's going to be the eBay of gambling. I said, sounds great, and they said, you're the only guy we know in London and you did a bit of gambling work, so why don't you do it with us? And I said, yeah, well, I've got the juice bars, it sounds interesting. 2 weeks later, they came back and said, we've got $5 million. I said, what do you mean you got $5 million? You just had an idea. I said, no, there's this guy called Bernard Arnault. You ever heard of him? He runs LVMH. He's got this internet fund, and he just wants to go big on the internet, and he loves the idea, and he's throwing money around. So I thought, okay, sounds pretty interesting. I was struggling to raise, £500,000 for a business that at that point was, generating real money, and here were two guys with an idea and a 10-page business plan, literally just been given $5 million. So off we went. Four guys who knew very little about business, but me, having run one juice bar for a year, was regarded as a true entrepreneur amongst us. So you can imagine the talent pool. What we were really good. We were 4 consultants who were brilliant at PowerPoint. We could write a great presentation. I mean, unbelievable, and a really good business plan. Now the problem and the kink in the story comes when it comes to execute the business plan, because we were pretty clueless about that. But if you can go back to late '99 and early 2000, when the internet bubble was at its peak, our investor, Europe at Web, came to us. The guy representing Mr. Arnault said, look, everyone's raising more money, you haven't got enough money. And we said, well, we've got $5 million. No, you need to go and raise $15 million. He said, well, we don't have a business yet, we just got a business plan. He said, don't worry about it. You need to hire people, because how they're valuing companies in the Valley is number of people. So you just got to hire 100 people, and then you can be valued at $100 million. And we thought, this is unbelievable. This sounds great. And what do we know? We're young 20-year-old guys. We said, all right. So we just went out and were hiring. And this is 100% the truth. We were on a hiring spree. Yeah, we need receptionists, we need head of marketing, we need this. And within a short period of time, we were up to 100 people. So we now had our $100 million valuation, clearly, and it was time to go out and raise money. And this was February, March 2000, and we set out to raise, I think, $12 million, and in 3 weeks we'd had offers of $40 million, just to give you a sense of the madness going on in the market. So in the end, we raised $24 million. We then had to go and execute the business plan, and I would say after about... We launched in April 2000. By December 2000, we were due to have 1.5 million customers and generating, I can't remember the exact number, but if I tell you we were generating in pounds less than £1,000 in revenue a week, you can imagine all these investors looking at us saying, geez, these guys have sold us a bit of a pup here. So we went from 40 to 100 to 140 people pretty quickly, and it was evident that we hadn't spent all the money. We spent a fair bit of capital. We had a lot of smart people, but we had a lot of inexperience around the table, myself included. There was another company out there, a company called Betfair, that couldn't raise capital because we'd raised it all. And here's a lesson for anyone raising capital. If you can go out there and raise all the money, it scares off a lot of other investors from backing the number 2, and that's exactly what happened. But these guys really knew what they were doing. They had a great concept. Similar to Flutter, but they'd executed it incredibly well. And we were not too proud to say, these guys have got it right, let's copy them. And so off we went and started to copy their concept, which created a great deal of acrimony amongst the businesses, because we were, despite the fact that I was an American, the other three guys were, and we were regarded as the Yanks with the bank. And I think there were dartboards in their office of pictures of us on them. So it was quite an acrimonious dynamic between the companies, but again, I think you've got to take emotion out of business, and it made ample sense that if we put these two businesses together, you had, I wouldn't say you'd locked up the market, but at the time you had 99.9% of the market, you had a lot of capital, you weren't spending your time fighting each other, and that really was the platform for that business to go forward. So, it was an incredible experience, and I'll talk maybe a little bit more about some of the lessons here I had there. But one of the things that Alon asked me was to talk about what I see in entrepreneurs, and I guess there isn't a cookie cutter approach. I think everyone around the table here, you're going to have different characteristics. But when we look at a business, the one formulaic thing that we will do is we'll have our checklist, and we will tick boxes in terms of the entrepreneurs, because without someone that's backable, you can't invest. So if you were to ask me what the perfect entrepreneur is, I was trying to write 10, but I wrote 11. So we really like someone who's been unsuccessful in the past and learned from that experience. I think in the States, they do it really well. They embrace failure. For those of you who've kind of worked in Silicon Valley or elsewhere, failure is kind of a badge of honor. I think culturally here in the UK, we have a bit of an issue. And I'd love this generation to really start to embrace failure, because certainly the challenges I've had and where I failed in the past, I've learned a hell of a lot from that. So we are not put off by people who have failed. I think if you look at someone's CV and they've failed in 5 businesses in a row, then there's a pattern starts to emerge. But I think for those of you out there who've done things, 2 or 3 things, and spent years that haven't necessarily worked, that should be no barrier to you going out there and trying again. And I'm sure kind of far more eminent entrepreneurs than myself have gone out with the Bransons, the Bransons of the world and the Sugars of the world, have all kind of had glorious failures over the years. Try and keep it simple where possible. I think the most backable businesses tend to be the most simple businesses. And, I see a lot of business plans that people try and overcomplicate things, and I think it's so sophisticated and they are so smart that it must be investable. And if I look at probably the 1,000 businesses we've had a look at, and we've invested in 7 over the last 3.5 years, our businesses tend to be pretty simple. And I think if we look at a lot of the most successful, certainly internet businesses out there, I think you would agree, being an investor as well, simplicity is key. Having the ability to bounce back from disappointment and not let emotion impact. We talked just a little bit about emotion not impacting a decision to merge Flutter and Betfair back in 2001. And I think you really have to have that, because entrepreneurs tend to be very driven and emotional characters, but you've got to take that emotion out of your business decisions. And I think if we see, certainly if we get to a stage where we negotiate and we tend to see an emotional entrepreneur, that's kind of a bit of a red flag for us, as long as if you can't reason with them. Reacting well under stress. Again, anyone who runs their own business or is part of a fast-growing business, there is a lot of stress out there. You don't have this safety blanket of a big corporate out there. So if you want that, and you think you want to kind of get into entrepreneurship, then if you don't react well under stress, it's not for you. Somebody who doesn't need reassurance or feel lonely at the top. The one thing that was most stark to me, and certainly in the juice bars and being part of Betfair, and then doing another entrepreneur running a large software center in China, which I ran. The buck stops with you, and if you've had a bad day, you often can't sit around the water cooler and have a chat and bitch and moan. It's you need. No one's telling you on a day-to-day basis you're doing a good job. No one might ever tell you. I mean, I've been doing this. Certainly running this fund for 3.5, 4 years. I don't think anyone's ever come up to me and say, "Hey, good job today. Well done for coming in. That's great." So if you're needy, it's not right for you. Recognize your weaknesses. I think that's one of the first things that I learned, and I think the rude awakening of trying to kind of run a chain of juice bars. I thought I was an all-rounder, and it was quickly evident to me that I was hopeless at lots of things. And certainly when we launched the Flutter business, it was to focus on the areas you're good at and hire for your weaknesses. And I think any entrepreneur that can recognise that has got a great chance. Active listening skills. Again, entrepreneurs tend to be single-minded and strong-willed, but you've got to listen. A lot of the time you're going with your instinct. It's such an important factor, but you're not always right. If you're right 8 times out of 10, that's fantastic, but don't have too fixated a view. I think some of the greatest frustrations I've had with certain entrepreneurs have been they've just stayed the course too long on a particular area, where it's clear they were wrong, but they were just too stubborn to turn back. And I think it's so important to kind of hold your hands up. I talked a little bit about intuition, and I think that's probably the single most important factor. I think that's important as an investor, but I think it's incredibly important as an entrepreneur, because you're not always backed up with huge amounts of data. You don't have a team of analysts telling you what you're doing is right. And certainly for me, yes, if I had a team of analysts, they'd probably spending their time trying to work out what I wanted them to say and give me the data to back it up. So, in many cases, I would say for me, 9 times out of 10, my gut is right. And I think, I'd absolutely say follow your instinct. Be a good judge of person. I think hiring is so important. I think the biggest single mistakes I've made over the last 15 years have been in hiring. If somebody's not right, I've always taken too long to get them out of the business, and I've never once regretted removing someone or firing someone and said, I should never have got rid of that guy. But every time I said, why did it take me so long? And I'm sure everybody around the room who's been in that position, I challenge anyone to come up and say, I should never have done that. The amount of times I've heard, we'll give them 3 more months. We'll give her 3 more months. I think, it's not the environment hasn't quite been right, and there's been a few mitigating circumstances. So make those decisions. Your instinct is absolutely right 9 times, if not 99 times out of 100 in terms of hiring. So something to really focus on, and don't give up. Lots of ups and downs, lots of emotional roller coasters. On a monthly basis, and without a shadow of a doubt, you have more downs than ups. I wouldn't advise people to flog a dead horse, and often there are people out there who just, won't walk away from something that's clearly not working. But at the same time, there will be some challenges, and you need a strong constitution to kind of take that on. So don't easily give up. So if all those or many of those characteristics suit you, then I think you've definitely got the wherewithal to be an entrepreneur if you're not already. And I'm sure many people around the room will kind of empathise with some of those characteristics. And I haven't said them all. I just these are the ones that are certainly important to us. So I've been asked somewhat nervously by Alon to say, you need to talk about your mistakes. Yeah. So I've already talked a little bit about recruitment, and definitely I would say, somebody says, what's been your biggest mistake? And there isn't just one. I mean, you're making mistakes all the time. It's just the biggest mistake is not learning from your mistake. If you don't learn from them, you're going to repeat them. So, without a shadow of doubt, you make a mistake, my goodness, you've got to learn from it. So don't make that same mistake twice. One of the things that I was most challenged by at Betfair, we were launching this business internationally, and it was 2002, and the internet was still in its early days. I was running what was then the international business, but the international business was people just finding us somehow. And in a matter of 6 months, we were going to launch 20 languages and go in 50 countries, and I really had no experience in what that actually meant. So it was turning on the tap. And so I spent probably 200 days a year on the road, flying around. And so I got a real appreciation kind of crash course in how to launch your business internationally. And I guess if any of you out there are doing it or have done it or aspire to do it, I think, I spent 6 years in Asia, and my first major mistake was we were launching a Chinese site in Cantonese Mandarin. Chinese are prolific gamblers, as I'm sure many of you know. They're unbelievably superstitious. So we said, right, we've got to really localize this site. So we're going to make it red, because red's a really lucky colour. And so Betfair was a blue image. We said, we've got to make this whole thing red. And we thought we were very smart. And they like lots of flashing things, so we kind of had things flashing around the site. We thought, God, we are super smart. And we spent a fair bit of money. We had a local consultant who we thought was an expert, which we were later to find out was not. And we did this big marketing campaign around the region. I was PRing in Singapore and Malaysia and Indonesia and China and Hong Kong and Macau, Taiwan, you name it. I was just going around. We were spending lots of money. And we had this free phone number, which was, to sign up customers and to educate them about, what Betfair was, why it was different, why they should be betting on this type of platform. And literally, we hit 1% of our target. And we were sitting there scratching our heads saying, this is just bizarre, there's something not right here. I mean, what have I done? Am I just, maybe we should have hired somebody who didn't look Western. They said, no, it's fine. And we had great PR in the press. And why people were interested in it, but no one was calling up. Anyway, rather than kind of, to cut this long story short, we had made a terrible error with the phone number, which we found out. For anyone, now I know, and it seems so obvious, but I only know because I made this mistake, but for anyone who's done business in China or in that part of the world, 4 is a really unlucky number. It's a really unlucky, it sounds like death. And you cannot put 4 in a phone. I mean, it's just the worst thing you can do for a superstitious gamblers is to put that. And we had a number that had more 4s than you can imagine. And so what people do with numbers, they translate them. So they'll translate any of the characters, and they'll say, and it was, death to you, death to you, death to you, this number. I mean, so something so simple. And just for us, we thought we'd done all these things, and we'd used a local consultant who clearly was clueless, as I said. So that was a really big lesson for us, and something that stayed with me. And if I can carry on the theme of me cocking up our business in Asia initially, we wanted a local partner. So we said, we really don't know enough about. This was after the experience of the 4s. We need to find a local partner, and the best local partner is Dr. Stanley Ho. Stanley Ho ran the monopoly in Macau for 40 years, and he was the guy. Macau has opened up and has become the Las Vegas of Asia these days. And we, after through a lot of kind of meetings and through kind of calling in favors, and we did a partnership, an online partnership, and we could use the name, Dr. Ho in our online platform, and we thought, well, he's got ferries going to and from Macau. This is a great marketing coup. We can lobby his, so we can market to his casino customers. I mean, this is a dream partnership. So I spent 9 months negotiating this deal, and we did the deal, and came back to the office and high fives, and it's a great hero, and we're going to kill it in Asia now, and. Again, we launched this partnership, big fanfare, and really it didn't. All these promises that we'd had in the contract of you're going to be able to advertise on the ferry, and you're going to be able to, and there's millions of people that go each year, and we'll be targeting all the casino customers in hotel rooms. Anyway, none of this happened. And we said, what is going on here? We just spent nearly a year negotiating this deal, and we went to see the daughter, one of the daughters, and it just wasn't delivering. Now we had performance clauses. The one smart thing, at least I did in this, was we had performance clauses, and they didn't hit them. So the challenge was, we've got to extract ourselves out of this contract, but we need to work out why this wasn't working. So what we then worked out was that Dr. Ho had 4 wives, And in Macau, it was legal up until the 80s to have concubines. And there was a pecking order of these wives and their children as a result. And the Ho that we had done a deal with the daughter, despite the fact that, you know, he'd given her the name, she was not favoured. She was not going to be the heir. And as a result, although this deal had been done, it was all about face and paying lip service. But in terms of execution, he was never going to do any of the things that they promised to do. So we pretty much wasted a year. And again, that was, you know, local intelligence on the ground. So, you know, a pretty humbling experience. And again, you know, you can imagine having walked into the office with the high fives. I kind of sloped back in, you know, many months later, having not quite delivered the Asian plan. But, you know, with failures come some successes as well. And so we learned from that experience and went on to do some good other things.